I hit the button. We'll see how this works today. Because I would be very fascinated to see how this pans out. Because basically what I did was get it off of a hard line and onto the Wi-Fi, which would be very interesting to see if that works better.
All right.
I don't know. I don't actually know what I'm doing. I just like to hit buttons. That's all I ever do.
Hold on 1 second.
Just one.
Think. Wait, no. Now you made me forget what I was doing. Oh, yes. Local recording.
Those are unnecessary, right?
Sure.
Mike is a little blurry on my side. It's not a lot I can do about it right now.
I'm blurry?
He's blurry. Has to do with the network stuff.
Oh, okay. It's like out of focus?
No, it's on this side. It's pixelated,
Okay.
not the camera.
Gotcha. All right. They made me forget again. What am I doing here?
I don't know.
Local recording. That's right. 139.
Now let's see.
Okay. Video hijack.
Buttons. Buttons all around. Lots.
Hijack that audio.
And lots of buttons.
All right. And then I gotta, okay. Pause that.
Oh yeah, I need my notes. Notes are important.
Yeah, you do.
Notes.
I am blurry. Holy cow. Let's just cover that up so we don't see it anymore.
Hi, Carol. Who else is here? Blake and Martin. It's lots of switches. You have way more switches than we do, Blake. Lots of switches.
That is the truth.
Let's see. All right, I'm going to do one thing quick on Mike. We'll see if it does anything to improve Mike. It helped a little bit. Okay. You ordered the new Twisby Swipe today. Carol.
Nice.
Do we need to have a conversation? I feel like every time Twisby even mentions a new color or a pen, you have it in your hands before it's released. That's what it feels like. It's my perspective. Yeah, I think I'm good anytime, Mike.
Oh. All right. Well, I won't share this with the podcast listeners. This is just for you folks who are joining us live. I was sent a box of vintage pens. I shared the picture with Joe. I took them into Anderson Pens because I didn't know what any of them were. I know nothing about vintage pens. There's some really nice ones in there. There was a Faber-Castell limited edition, which they told me that it's probably $800 or $900. There was an Aurora Optima, an Omas, something or other, like some very, very nice pens. Couple of Pelicans. Yeah. And they just showed up one day with a note that said, I listened to you talk about these pens and you need to give these a good home. Yes, I will do that. They're a little crusty and need to be cleaned quite a bit.
Yep.
But it's pretty nice.
So have you figured out how you're going to do that? Can Anderson do that for you? Like, can they refurb them? Or are you gonna go through that process? Like, what's your goal there?
I'm gonna clean them, and if I can't get it, I'll bring them in there. They have a sonic cleaner thingy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that, yeah, I guess is like $600. So it's like none of the other ones that I've found are any good, but this one's way too expensive for me to recommend, so he wouldn't even tell me what it was.
Yep. Yep.
So
Basically, we have this thing. Nobody should own it unless you do this professionally.
yeah.
That's what that says.
Yep. That was basically it.
Yep.
So yeah, I haven't had time to rehab them yet, but hopefully this weekend I can start to clean them up a little bit. That was pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. Uh,
Something else pretty cool happened, but I'll wait till we buttons to mention that.
yeah. Hmm.
You know about this already.
Okay. I was trying to think through. Like, wait, what? What am I missing?
Just seeing real quick if it made any sort of difference in our numbers. I think it made a little bit of a bump at the beginning, like I showed you, but
Oh, yeah.
I haven't looked at it since. Libsyn stats are garbage now.
They've been steadily making their service worse. Have you noticed that?
Ugh. Yes, I noticed that now.
They've been trying to keep up with these other podcast providers,
Mm-hmm.
and really all they've done is like change their UI and made things buried further down in it to make it more like menu-esque,
Yeah,
which actually makes it worse as an experience because you can't get to things right away like you used to.
yeah.
So you're going backwards when you do that.
Well, I can tell you the total downloads are significantly more for the last episode than the first 7-day downloads for the previous episode.
Nice. That's good to know.
Looks like it's about 20% higher.
So we need to say welcome to a whole bunch of new people on this episode.
Yeah. All right.
We can do that.
I think I'm good to go if you are. Oh, I know what I was going to talk to you about. You didn't put any other profiles in this outline.
I didn't.
Is that because you like these or because other reasons?
I went through the whole list and was like, I think these are the right 9 to cover.
Okay.
And I felt like there was maybe 1 or 2 that I would be interested in changing, but I was like 50-50 as to which one I'm going to go with. But Mike is interested in that one, so that's an easy sway. So
Okay.
I think you got the right ones here.
All right. Sounds good. Then I think we're ready. Spy. Not filter. Okay. So I'm just reading notes out loud.
That's always fun to do.
Yeah. Let's push some buttons and make a podcast, shall we?
Okay.
All right. 3, 2, 1. So something pretty cool happened last week, Joe.
I know, and it's pretty cool. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, Blake is on to us in the chat here. Ali Abdal mentioned Bookworm in a YouTube video, which I will paste the link here in the chat to the chapter where he starts talking about this. The bummer about this is that I didn't know about this for a couple of days. And by the time I found out about it, I was at dinner with my wife and I got a text message from my friend saying, dude, Ali Abdal just name dropped Bookworm. I immediately went to look and realized that his team had linked to the wrong Bookworm. So first couple of days when 100,000 plus people were watching the video, it was pointing to our old nemesis, KCRW. See, we let up too soon, Joe. We stopped the fight too soon.
We did.
And then it came back to bite us.
It totally did. Yep. Then here we are. But alas, at least we were acknowledged. So if you have found us through Ollie, welcome. Welcome to Bookworm. Glad to have you on board. Welcome to the team.
Yeah. And thank you, Ollie, for the mention. That was super cool to see. And it got sorted out. He was very responsive. Team fixed it right away. So, and it's super cool to know that Ollie Abdaal listens to Bookworm.
Yeah. Hi, Ollie.
I've been a fan of Ollie's for quite a while. Heard him on different podcasts and followed some of his YouTube stuff. I'm not big into YouTube, but he's one of the few people that I watch what he makes because I think it's really, really good. I remember him making the Notion tracker video back in the day. That was the thing that actually made Notion click for me when I was using it for some editorial stuff, and kind of influences a lot of the things that we do editorial wise with Notion at the Suite setup. But super, super cool. And yeah, thank you for the mention. And it's always kind of interesting to me because it's not a big, we're not a big podcast. I mean, the other people on that list are like the Tim Ferriss shows and things like that. And every once in a while, I'll hear somebody share something or see somebody link something. Like Andre Chaperone actually was another one who had a post, and he's the guy behind the Tiny Little Business website and had a list of his favorite podcasts. I saw Bookworm on there one time. Like, oh, that's super cool. I've been literally following you for a very long time. It's awesome to see that people who I appreciate, they appreciate some of the stuff that we do. Always warms the conkles of my heart.
The conkles of your heart. Nice. Yeah, it is a little. It's a strange feeling when you have people who you admire, you look up to, and consider a strong mentor of yours from a distance, invert it and start paying attention to you. Like, that's such a weird feeling.
Yeah, so I have a word for those people. They are my internet heroes. And I've used that term for quite a while. And when I first started using it, my wife would kind of roll her eyes at me. But it's interesting because I have, since I started using that term, been able to connect with and meet several of my internet heroes.
Yeah.
And I want to pay that forward. When I have the opportunity to pull somebody else up, I want to take advantage of that. That kind of sparked that because Blake was mentioning, I guess I got to watch what I say now.
Yep. Always.
Yeah.
Always watch what you say. You never know who's listening.
It's true. So that was cool. You know what else is cool? Follow-up is cool.
It is.
Let's
sometimes
talk about some of these action items. Did you make better use of your fresh starts?
I think so. Maybe. I discovered something the last 2 weeks, and that is that if you want to find fresh starts, you can find them just about everywhere. The problem with fresh starts is that you can find them just about everywhere.
That is true.
So it's both a positive and a negative to some degree. So I'm learning that I need to just be aware of that and try to adjust my expectations for what comes out of those, but at the same time trying not to overdo that at the same, in the same interval there, because it's easy to try to make use of every single one of them, and then the next thing you know, you're always trying to change something, and that's not helpful either.
True. Your other action item here was to be more intentional with your time-based reminders.
Yeah.
How'd you do with that?
I have added a bank of time-based reminders and realized that I have probably too many different systems in place for that. And namely, like, I've got some that come through OmniFocus. I've got some that come through the Do app. Now anymore, I've got a few of them that are coming out of Obsidian, but I'm not a real big fan of the Obsidian method with those because they don't seem to actually work at the exact time. Maybe that's just the way I've got it set up. I don't know. But I've been unable to get them to actually trigger at the time I need them out of Obsidian. So I'm probably abandoning that particular process. But yes, I got to figure out what the right mechanism is for those.
All right.
So maybe I might be better with time-based reminders. I've set more of them than I have historically, which is I think is a good thing. But at the same
That's
time, like that means that they end up in too many different places.
that's probably a win. But yeah, I don't know. It's I feel that tension too with it's really task management that the reminders for me tend to get spread out, and it's tempting to try to have like one system where you have everything, but there's definitely limitations with that kind of stuff too. I'm still experimenting with running everything out of Obsidian, and I think that's going to work for me. But there's advantages to things like do, for example, where you can have those nagging reminders and they just keep showing up until you actually do the thing. So I get it. I've got two action items here for finding more opportunities for fresh starts and creating a mulligan plan. And the opportunities for fresh starts, I did make a list of these, and they are basically everywhere. I don't know which of these I intend to really take advantage of, but just the obvious ones are like start of the year. I put start of a quarter because I've got the whole personal retreat framework that I follow. So coming back from that, starting a new quarter, that's obviously an opportunity for a fresh start. But then things like anniversaries and birthdays, after a vacation, the start of the school year, launching a product, even something like Mondays,
Yep.
I
Yep.
feel are a opportunity for a fresh start. So I started making this list and quickly realized that this is going to get overwhelming with if I try to do something with all of these. So I think I'm going to mark this as done and just walk away from it saying I've made the list and recognize that there are lots of these. So next time I'm looking to leverage one, just grab the closest one. Or if there's something that I feel is more significant, it's going to take more effort, then maybe I'll do something a little bit bigger, like a anniversary or a birthday or something like that. But that's done. And then the creating the mulligan plan, I did this as well. And this was just simply listing out like the number of times per week I wanted to do certain things. And in the previous episode, I had given some like exercise based ones, which I intended to use as like a springboard into thinking about some other areas. I actually just kept it to that. uh, I was thinking about like journaling or mindfulness meditation or stuff like that. And I just thought like I don't really like the way that the mulligan plan is coming together for that kind of stuff. So I'm just gonna keep it for the exercise because that's the thing where I've got to make sure I do certain numbers of things in a given week. So mine is simply exercise 3 times a week, or really lift 3 times a week, run twice a week, and bike once a week, which is 6 days a week then, and I'm working out. But the last couple of years, I'd actually been working out every single day, and it felt great. So I feel like that's very doable. I've slipped with that in the recent past because broke my hand, couldn't lift, everything got thrown kind of out of whack, trying to get back into the swing of things and establish a normal routine again. Um, and it's still kind of fuzzy how it's going to shake out because the lifting routine that I have, the gym that is right by our house that we used to go to is under new management, and I don't like it. It's a very different meatheadish crowd,
Okay.
and it's just not my scene.
Yep. Yep.
So I got to find someplace new, but everywhere that I've looked, it just kind of rubs me the wrong way. So I don't know where I'm going to go. I just know that I don't really want to go there.
Sure.
Toying around with creating a new routine with stuff at home. I have some things at home. Thanks, Blake, for the rowing machine idea, which cost me a bunch of money, but I've been doing it consistently and it feels great. I've also got some adjustable dumbbells and a bike and stuff like that. So I could do like a simple version of things, but I, my routine as is currently constructed requires uh, a little bit more in terms of the facilities and stuff. So I got to sort through that. I did find a church nearby which has a sports program, so it actually has a like a weight room, but it's not a great weight room. They do have a couple of basketball courts, and they have like open gym, which that has got me thinking about maybe going back and playing basketball once a week.
Yep.
Because it's been a long time since I actually played. Like I coached my son's team, but not played with a bunch of guys before in several years. And it's ridiculously cheap. It's $10 for a family for a month.
That is cheap.
Yeah. So I like everything about that except the facilities in the weight room. So still don't know how that's gonna shake out, but I've got the mulligan plan at least. Just gotta hammer out the specifics of the routine yet.
Highly recommend the basketball deal. I play basketball with a group of guys every Thursday morning, 6 a.m. And
Nice.
I'm the one that makes everybody run more than normal because that was the way my high school team played. It was full speed, 4 quarters. You never stop running. Like that was that's what we did. And our goal was to wear everybody out by the fourth quarter and then get all your points in the fourth quarter. That was how we played. So I've not broken that old habit apparently.
Yeah, it's funny because the last time I played with a group of guys, I was playing early in the morning. They played at 5:30 at a local high school,
Hmm.
and they moved, so I stopped going. Turns out the place that they moved is this church.
Oh,
That was like several years ago,
yeah.
and they used to play like Tuesdays and Thursday mornings, I think. I forget the cadence, but
Hmm.
now they play every morning from 5 to 8
Nice.
at the church.
5 in the morning till 8 every day. That is
Yep.
intense. Wow. That's a
I don't think
commitment.
the same group plays, but it's probably grown a bit and they have people coming and going. But
Wow.
yeah, it's on the schedule like 5 to 8 every day.
Huh.
So that's pretty cool. I will join that at some point, but I also am a little bit hesitant. My finger's still healing. I don't want to do anything stupid.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. We should play basketball sometime.
Let's do it.
We'll have the Bookworm Basketball Club.
Oh, dude, I love that idea.
It's a little bit of a commute for you and I to get together to do that, though.
That is true. That is true. Well, should we talk about today's book?
Yeah, this could be a long one if we're not careful.
That is understatement of the year. So today's book is Personal Socrates by Marc Champagne. And this is hard to describe as a book. It's a bunch of profiles, I believe that he calls them, of primarily famous people who he's kind of done some research and some studies on who these people are and what they've accomplished and kind of dissected their thought processes and condensed it down into some clarifying questions. All right. So on the back of this book, which was printed in conjunction with Baron Fig, it says, "At any point, we are one question away from a different life." And I love that premise. It reminds me a lot of the concept of thinking time from, I think it was The Road Less Stupid by Keith Cunningham. And in that book, the big takeaway I remember was that when you learn to ask the right questions, then the answers become clear. So combine that approach of finding the right questions with a book that is literally just a bunch of clarifying questions, and you've got a recipe for Mike's kind of book.
When I first opened this, I saw the quote that was on the back. At any point, we are one question away from a different life. And I immediately thought, did he write this for Mike? I'm pretty sure this book is a result of an interview with Mike. It has to be. Like that was my initial reaction on reading that quote. But before that, I have to just point out, like we've mentioned this about a handful of books, probably over the last maybe 6 months or so, how the form factor starts to play a big role in your experience with the book. Like they're starting to think about how it feels in your hands and not just print a book and get it out the door. And when Mike mentioned that this is in conjunction with Bear and Fig, keep in mind that Bear and Fig, like one of their claims to fame is high quality notebooks, like for writing in them, for taking notes and such. Like that's what they've done in the past. So for them to take that same style and to put it into a nonfiction book format, like there's just so many things they did with this that are fascinating to me. Like if you've noticed, Mike, like you can open this book to pretty much any page and it will stay there. Have you noticed that?
Yes.
Like it will,
Very confidant-esque.
yeah, it definitely is. But there's also some, like they've of course got, a couple variations, I think 3 or 4 different variations of fonts and colors. But there's one little tiny thing that they did in the bottom right-hand corner of the right-hand page of every single one of these chapters that when I saw it, I thought, huh, why don't more books do this? This is brilliant. I love this because I do this all the time. But in the bottom, on the right-hand side, bottom right of the right-hand page, it will tell you how many pages are left in that chapter. So it's usually 4, sometimes 3 pages left in that particular section. And you don't have to skip ahead to see how many pages it is before you're done with it. I feel like this is brilliant because I'm always doing this. Like, I don't want to start the next section if I've only got a couple minutes, but if it's going to be 2 pages, I'll do that. Or if I've got 15 minutes and I know how many, like, you get what I'm saying? Like, you can look ahead. I do that all the time, glance ahead to see how much of a chapter I have left, but I don't have to do that with this. I don't know why that little thing, like, made my day when I figured out what was going on. It's brilliant. People should do this more often.
It is. I agree. That's one of those things that just eliminates a little bit of friction when you're reading it. Because I do the same thing as you. I'm reading another book right now, and I do that exact thing where you skip ahead to see how many pages are left in the chapter.
All the time.
And I didn't even realize how much that annoyed me until I was done with this one. And then I started doing it again, and I had the same recollection. Like, oh, the personal Socrates book just told me.
Yes. I started in on our next book, and I was like, oh, I have to glance ahead again. Please bring it back. Please, everybody. I don't know whose idea this was at Baron Fig, but they need to, like, tell every publisher everywhere to do this. Please do this. If you're a publisher, please do this.
Yeah, and the paper in the book itself, it feels a little bit weird in my opinion for a book. It's pretty thin. I mean, it's not low quality, but it feels a little bit, I mean, the cover doesn't. I was banging it on my desk before we started. Like, are you pounding on your keyboard? Like, no, that's the cover of the book hitting my desk.
Totally sounded like he was hitting the keys on his keyboard. It totally did.
Yeah. But the paper feels a little bit flimsy for me, but no big deal.
Yeah. I can't say I noticed that. I do know, like, you can tell that they were intentional about how much space they left around the words. Like, sometimes when you get a book, they like to print the page really close to the edge of the words. That's annoying because then you can't write in it. This one, they specifically left you like 3/4 of an inch around the outside so you could write in those margins. And then they leave you 2 or 3 pages, 4 pages in the back for notes as well. Like, this is a company that knows you need to use a book and not just, put it on a shelf and make it look pretty.
So I did not actually write in my book. Did you?
I always do. Yes, because I'm an animal like that.
Did you write with a fountain pen, perchance?
Did I? No, I don't think in this case I did. Sometimes I do, but in this case I don't think that happened.
I don't want to mark up my book, but I am curious because Baron Fig paper is, like you said, usually pretty decent. If that means that it would actually work with a fountain pen or not.
We're going to find out.
Generally, you don't want to use a fountain pen when you mark up your books. It's going to create a mess.
Right.
But if there's one book where it might work, this is probably the one.
I mean, it bleeds a hair, but not much.
Okay. Yeah, I would feel comfortable using a fountain pen in this.
Yeah, I would feel comfortable using a fountain pen in this. 'Cause, I mean, it bleeds a little bit, but not much. Okay. Yeah, I would feel comfortable using a fountain pen in this. 'Cause, I mean, it bleeds a hair, but not much. So yeah, I would say so.
Cool. It also comes in a box and includes a very cool bookmark.
Yep. Did you use it, or did you use the Bookworm bookmark?
Good question. I'm pretty sure I used the Bookworm bookmark, but I also kept the original one in the book itself. But I tend to grab the same Bookworm bookmark at this point, and when I'm done with a book, bring it with me to my next book. Pretty sure that's what I did with this one also. But this bookmark is, yeah, it's got like this reflective material on it for like the keyhole design, and it's very clever. It definitely fits with the whole aesthetic. It's like a whole package. It's not just a book,
Right.
and it feels really well done. I really like the color scheme. It's like this blue, gray, black sort of a thing, and every single page has like little hints of color in it. It's not like color diagrams or anything like that, but just very much in line with the design of the cover and the box itself. And like I said, I absolutely love this premise for the book. There's all these different profiles. I don't know how many there are altogether. I didn't count them all up, but they are broken into three different sections because hashtag productivity book.
Yep. All great books, 3 parts.
Yeah. Part one is get clear. Part two is live intentionally. And part three is expand possibility. And each of these profiles is probably somewhere between 3 and 8 pages, depending on who he's talking about. And rather than try to go through all of them, we picked some and I added a couple of them for each section. I got mad at Joe before we recorded because I said, "You didn't add anything. I told you to put the ones you wanted to discuss in the
Yep.
outline, and we just agreed on the ones we wanted to talk about."
Yes.
So,
Because I think
anything else you want?
I just want to say that like in each of these parts, I was trying to get a quick count because I think there's what is there 12, 15 in each. I don't remember if they're the exact same number. So there's somewhere around 12 to 15 per part, 10 to 15 somewhere in there. But we're going to go through 3 per part here. And I just want to point that out because there's so much more than what we're going to cover today. At least I think over the plan of what we're going to cover today, there's a lot more. We'll see if we cover the whole thing or not. Let's probably not do that. This will be a 4-hour episode if we do that. But there's a lot in here. Like there's a lot of names in this book that are mentioned that we're not even gonna step into. Like James Clear is here and we're skipping over him. So
Because we've already talked about him.
right. But we're also skipping over Picasso. So there's that.
Yeah, it's true. Well, I did give you an opportunity.
You did. But I think we have the right 9. I think we're good.
Yeah. And I guess before we get into the individual parts, we should mention that Marc Champagne is a podcaster for a show called Behind the Human. So he's talked to a lot of these people, not everybody. And he also was the person behind the KYO journaling app,
Yep.
which I tried to go back and find. He tells his story at the beginning how it had 87 million downloads and he's sitting there ready to delete it from the store because he had asked himself a question which made clear a different life path for him. And I thought that was a really cool way to introduce the book. It did not feel like sometimes that kind of stuff is like, oh, look at all this stuff that I was able to accomplish. And then look at me, I made the ultimate sacrifice. Me, I. You know, he was just setting up this curiosity theme. And I thought he did it really well.
Yeah. Yeah. It was one of those scenarios where like, wait, you had this nailed. You had the product. You had it. And you deleted it? Okay.
Yeah.
Now I have lots of questions. Thankfully, you're going to process a lot of questions here too. So that was a great hook to get you going, and that was just in the introduction. So, yes.
Yep. Agreed. All right. So let's go to part one here, which is get clear. And there are lots of different profiles that we could choose from. I want to start here with the first one, though, on Cal Fussman. And each of these profiles is kind of set up the same way. The title of the chapter or the profile is the question that you can apply yourself from the profile in question. So the question for this profile is, how can I ask the most powerful questions? That is a great one to start with for the way this book is formatted. And Cal Fussman is, according to the bio in the book, an iconic journalist, author, and storyteller. And then there's a little bullet point list of the things that they've done. So, longtime writer for Esquire magazine and New York Times bestselling author, interviewed icons like Muhammad Ali, Serena Williams, Jeff Bezos, Robert De Niro, host of the Big Questions podcast, had breakfast with Larry King every morning, and these bullet points are interesting because some of them are just life accomplishments, but then some of them are insights into the way that they think. Like the very next one is philosophy to life. If you change your questions, you can change your life. One of the greatest interviewers and storytellers of all time. So I really like these little bios. And for the most part, we're going to skip over these. But I feel like this is a very effective approach rather than trying to tell a story about who the person is. Having some quick bullet points where you can refresh yourself on their history if you need it before Mark gets into his profile of the person makes this actually a much shorter book than it could have been. I mean, if you don't crank through those bullet points and you're trying to set a stage for why this person is important, this could be 5 times the length.
Oh yeah, easily. Easily. This is the point in the book where I realized that Mark is asking questions about the book format as he goes through it. Like, you realize that? Because what you just said, it would be very easy to make this book twice as long as it is, and it's already 250 pages. And
True.
going through it, it doesn't feel like that. It feels like it's very short, even though it is one of the, like, on the longer side of things. Like 200 is kind of what I tend to expect out of him. And this point when he's got these bio points, they even make it in a smaller font, make it a slightly lighter color gray. Like, they do all those things. And like, I would read these, like, because there's a lot of names in here I don't know. And I'm sure that's partly why he's doing this, because there are obviously going to be some that you know, but a lot of them you don't. And even the ones you know, like one of them we're going to cover later, Kobe Bryant, like, there's some points in that bio. Like, I feel like I know Kobe Bryant really well. Like, basketball was my sport. We talked about that earlier. But Kobe was, of course, somebody that every basketball player would look up to. And yet there's some things in that bio that, like, wait, I didn't know that. Like, that was completely new to me. So there's a lot of things in these that are super helpful. But you're right. It does speed up the process of getting you into the chapter.
So what these bios do, and by attaching them to a famous or semi-famous person, is it wraps the question in a story, which makes it more entertaining to read. But also, ultimately, the big takeaway in each one of these is the question or questions that you are left with. I mean, I don't even know how many action items I have from this book because I'm not going to write them all down for the podcast. There's
Right.
probably more than 12. It's every single section has multiple opportunities for you to brew on these questions. And again, any one of these can change your life. So, this one at the very beginning, I just like this because how can I ask the most powerful questions? That's really the approach going into this whole book, this whole project. And the big thing I walk out of this profile thinking about is, what are the questions that I'm not asking? It's great to have a clarifying question. Those clarifying questions are actually a key piece of the personal retreat stuff that I do. What should I start doing, stop doing, and keep doing? Simple questions, but there's a lot of clarity that comes from those. But I don't pretend that there aren't better questions to be asking, especially in specific scenarios. If you're trying to find clarity in a specific area of your life, there are other questions that are probably better openers than those are. And so I leave this first section curious as to, like, what are all the questions that are possible that I haven't even considered yet, because it kind of ends with this statement that you're never going to get an answer to a question that you don't ask. 100% true. And then we get blocked from asking great questions because we overthink situations. And this is the part where Mike raises his hand and says, guilty, because I do this all the time, trying to learn not to. And I feel like questions are a systems or a process driven solution to overthinking. If you force yourself to just follow the question, then you can circumvent a lot of the overthinking. At least that's my personal philosophy with this.
Yeah, and just to show the opposite side of the coin, you have been, and correct me if I put words in your mouth here, but you have been somebody who has preached or taught the value of asking yourself good questions for quite some time, and have been in the practice of asking reflective and challenging questions of yourself for a decent period now, probably years easily at this point. Is that fair statement?
Yep.
So the opposite side of that coin is somebody like me who doesn't do this at all. And I'm not someone who has a pat set of questions that I go through regularly up until just here recently, whenever we had a recent book that I'm drawing a blank on where we had 3 questions that came out of it. And I don't remember what those were. But I know that it's a part of my monthly questioning process right now. So like every month I'm answering these questions. And that is something that I find super helpful and want to expand on. So like you said, you could easily have tons of action items that come from this book because of the format of the way he lays this out. He gives you a story, tells you the background of the person and how they came to that question. They kind of flush it out with maybe 1 or 2 other examples and stories. And then he gives you a section at the end where it's like, here's a practical task for you to take on. And then he has a one-liner at the very end of a final thought. And that last little 1 page of here's what you need to do with this. Remember what I said? There's 10 to 15 of these per part, which means there's, I'd have to check, somewhere between 30 and 45 of these things. That means you can come out of here with at least 30 to 45 tasks, which gets to be intense, which is partly why one of mine is to just walk through this thing once more, just from a high-level overview, and just figure out which of those are worth doing right now, because it could get unwieldy very quick. So it's intense. It really is.
Yeah, it absolutely can be. The episode or the book with the questions, by the way, I dug it up while you were talking, is 4,000 Weeks.
There you go. Yep. Yeah, I think
So
Blake in the chat said he was reading that right now. It's a good one.
Yep. It definitely is. So you have all these questions from this book, and I don't know what exactly to do with all these, other than to consider them as we go through it, and then, like you said, probably go back and revisit them at some point. I'm toying around with the idea of just dumping all of these into a text file in Obsidian and creating some sort of like macro thing in Quick Add, which just grabs a random question and drops it in whatever node I happen to be in. Uh, I don't know. I don't know how effective that would be. On the one hand, I feel like maybe that's kind of cool because you never know what you're going to get. And so you might go into it thinking, I'm going to apply this lens, this mental model, but being forced to answer a different question can kind of jar you and give you a different perspective, which maybe would be beneficial, but maybe would just annoy me. I'm not sure yet.
See, I feel like that would drive me nuts. Like one of the methods that I've debated with this is putting your list together, but choosing what interval for each question. Because some of these you could ask yourself every day, and that'd be okay. Some of these I feel like you could only ask yourself about once a year. So like having them randomly show up on a potentially daily basis doesn't feel like it would be the right route to me. Maybe it would be for you. I don't know. But to me, I feel like I need to work through the decisions for how frequent should some of these be asked, and in my case, should some of these be asked? Because some of these don't. Like, I feel like there's a lot of cases where it doesn't apply, but at the same time,
Yep.
those are probably the ones you should ask more often too.
I think the big takeaway is just to ask more questions. I think if you do that, then this book is a success.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's
but
fair.
that's the first one. Anything else with Cal Fussman?
No, let's keep moving.
All right. So the next one that I wanted to talk about a little bit was Robin Williams. And the question with this one is, what does it mean to be unapologetically me? And I feel like that's the kind of question you just hear it and you're like, huh, I don't even really know because I've never really thought about that. And so I don't know. I have an action item here from this one to list out what I fear in a single sentence. Um, but I feel like the profile, well, it talks about Robin Williams, and most people are probably familiar with who Robin Williams is, and it talks a little bit about how he was dealing with depression and committed suicide and lost him before his time. So we were kind of robbed of the total influence that he could have had. But he also shares like the kind of person that he was and his approach to life. And I feel like that juxtaposition of here's somebody who is really well known for his comedic roles, and at the same time he's dealing with all of these personal demons, that that's an interesting juxtaposition. I guess if you are around somebody and they're always joking and they're always laughing, you're just like, that person, their life of the party, they must just be a happy person. Like, this is just who they are. But beneath that, it could be a facade. I'm not saying it was to Robin Williams, but this is just my thought process going through this is like, maybe that's a cover for something. Maybe there's some insecurity beneath the surface. And really the single word label for that, I think, is fear. So maybe it's fear of what other people are going to think. Maybe it's fear of letting somebody that you care a lot about down. But if you don't confront the fear, I feel like that's when it can have the most damage. Uh, when you name it, it doesn't seem as scary anymore. It's kind of like the fear setting exercise by Tim Ferriss. It's like, well, let's think about the worst case scenario. Oh, that's the worst thing that could happen. It's probably not going to be that bad. So what are you afraid of? Sort of a thing. So I don't know. What does it mean to be unapologetically me? That's the question that it leads with. But it's interesting to me that my action item from that is actually significantly different, where it's list out what I'm afraid of.
But see that's exactly where it should go, because see here, to answer the question, what does it mean to be unapologetically me? It comes with the predicated question of what does it mean to be me? Because you have to know that first, I think. And in a lot of cases, at least I know in my case, like to be completely honest with you, when I read that question, I'm like, wait, hold up. I'm not sure I'm 100% on what it means to be me, let alone unapologetically me.
Yep.
So, what does that even mean? And what do I do with that? Because I get very conflicted because I'm, a farm kid, but I'm in the tech world and I love building things, but I love writing. And there's so many of these things like, okay, well, what does it mean to be me? Scattered, like undecisive, but how do you approach that unapologetically? And like you're saying, like, how do you embrace like the fear or let go of the fear that comes with that? But you have to understand all those details, and that's not a simple thing to do. But at the same time, none of these questions are that simple to answer, and yet that's the point, right?
That is the point. it's almost doing the book a disservice to cover it the way that we do for Bookworm, because we have to get through it in 2 weeks. You could literally
Right.
spend the rest of your life wrestling with these questions. And I think that's kind of the intention, is maybe you don't do anything with some of these right now, but you do it at some point. And you're right. Like, if you think about what does it mean to be me, you probably think of your mannerisms and the things that you do, but you got to dig deeper and consider the motivations for why you do the things that you do. And maybe there's some insecurity or fear that's holding some of that stuff together, which should be dealt with and is uncomfortable to think about. But the question gives you a vehicle to deal with that stuff. If you're just left on your own, search your innermost parts, your soul, and figure out, where are the dark things that need to get fixed. That's really intimidating to think about. And answering a question, your mind just kind of goes down that path blindly. It's almost like you're tricked into it. And then once you're there, it's like, oh, this is uncomfortable, but you do it a handful of times. It's like going to the gym and you know that there's going to be good on the other side of it. So you aren't intimidated by the discomfort. But it's a lot easier to just engage with that stuff, I feel like, when you have these types of questions to help you.
Yeah. I just want to point out one thing at the beginning of this book. He makes the recommendation to read one of these profiles a day and not go beyond that. So for us to do this in 2 weeks is totally breaking the rule that he recommends. So I think if you were to follow his advice, you would probably get even more out of it. But it's Bookworm. We have to fly through things, right?
Agreed. He mentions a couple times in this book how, as part of his routine, he goes through the daily stoic. And that would be the closest thing I could compare this to if we were to try to cover the daily stoic
Yeah.
in a 2 week period.
Yep.
That's kind of what we're doing with this one.
Basically, it doesn't work too well. But here we are, and it's fun.
Well, I wouldn't say it doesn't work, but it's not the way that they intended you to engage with the material. You will get more out of it if you do it at a slower pace, for sure.
I meant trying to cover the book on Bookworm. Like, it just wouldn't work well. But yeah, I get what you're
Yeah.
saying.
The third one from this section that I wanted to talk about was Chip Conley. And the question here is, how can I be the most curious person in the room? And Chip Conley was a CEO and consulted with Airbnb, and basically just trying to the he's a serial entrepreneur who sold his company JDV, and then wrote 5 books about psychology and business. But then when he worked with Airbnb, really the focus was this hospitality. So how can you make people feel good, right? And so the approach that he's taken to a lot of this stuff is just to be curious about what people think and why things are the way that they are. The what if questions, the why questions, these are the ones he tends to lean into. In fact, at the beginning of this section, I like this because the very first part of this chapter, behind the question, I asked Chip the same question I ask each guest on the Behind the Human podcast: who are you? And Chip answered, I'm a curious white boy. I immediately knew I was in for a fantastic interview. And I like that because it's not shining a spotlight on him and his accomplishments, but really just highlights the fact that he wants to be present and figure out what other people and are thinking, and why things are the way that they are. I'm not doing a very good job of describing this, but I think there's a very important distinction here between like engaging with a question with a spotlight on yourself versus engaging with a question and looking outward at the people and the things and the systems and whatever around you. You won't notice a lot of things if you're just looking in, but you might notice some really cool stuff if you can flip that around and instead look out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so let me try to pull some of this together because I think I understand what you're trying to piece together here, Mike. But uh, so the question, how can I be the most curious person in the room? So process that for a second. In order to be the most curious person in the room, you have to have a handful of things. You have to have an awareness of who's in the room that you're talking to, which means that you need to be paying attention to their feelings and their thoughts and their processes of their processes of thinking, mental models, I guess. If you can put those pieces together, you have to be aware of those things. You have to pay attention to every word that they're saying and how they're saying it. And you also have to have an awareness of how your stance, your words, and your physical appearance impacts what they're saying. Basically, you have to be hyper aware of what's going on in that interchange. The reason for that is because in order to be the most curious, you have to notice a lot of little details, and you have to then be in a spot where you wonder why they're doing those things. Like if Mike mentions something about obsidian, he generally gets excited. Like you can tell that. It's pretty obvious. So obsidian is a big deal to Mike. Obviously, if you're new to the show, Mike has an obsession, right, Mike? You'll admit this, right? Surely you will.
I do. It's
So
true.
Mike gets excited when obsidian comes up. On the other hand, if you mention Rome research, which Mike used to be super excited about, things are a little different anymore. It doesn't have that same air that obsidian does. Now, those are all things that you can pick up on if you have a conversation with Mike about note making and trying to see if I can use some of your terms like sense making, note making, map of content. Like I start throwing these terms out and you can just tell Mike is itching to start a conversation. Like I can tell this by looking at him. So
It's
if you
true.
notice those things, you can then find your jumping off points for questions to like, okay, well, why is that? You know, based on what I just said, if you ever run into Mike, you can ask him about why Obsidian over Realm Research, and you're in for a treat for a conversation. Like you can start the conversation that way, right? That's what it means. Like, so in order to be the most curious person in the room, you also have to be the most aware person in the room and the most present in the room. So it's not just as simple as asking good questions, it's being in that moment with that other person at that time.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And that was something that I had missed in my description was that the person who is the most curious is also the most present. If you were to summarize it in a single phrase, that's a
Yeah.
great way to describe it.
Yes.
Yeah, and so uh, the action item I have from this particular section, which I'm going to add to my journaling template, is how was I curious today? And I feel like that is reinforcing a bunch of different positive behaviors in a very simple by simply using the word curious. Because if you're going to be curious, you're not going to try to explain in a way that this is the way things are or like convince somebody of the way that they should think. You're going to try to understand why they think the way that they do. It's a very different approach. And I feel like there's a tendency for myself to take the other approach where, well, maybe this goes along with the systems thinking stuff is like, well, let's figure out why this is the way it is. But then once I get to that point, it's like, okay, well, here's the solution. Let's just do this and then we'll get this. and then we'll move on and solve the next systems problem. And I don't think it's that simple. I want to do a better job of accepting things for the way that they are. Content, not complacent. I'm not just, there's nothing I can do about this. And so this is my lot in life. I do think there's a fine line here with self determination and personal responsibility, which is important, taking control and ownership of your life and your future. But then also not like resenting the fact that you're in this situation. Maybe there are some situations where you really just don't want to be there. And I'm not saying like don't fight to make things different. But for me personally, like don't engage with things through a negative mindset and being bitter because you got to do this thing. Just go into it being present and you'll enjoy it a whole lot more.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put the whole thing together, because if you are being curious on a daily basis and coming at it the way that we're explaining, like it has so many ramifications behind it that are tertiary or secondary to the original intent. So go for it. Be curious.
Right. All right. Part 2 is live intentionally. And the first profile here that I wanted to discuss is Kobe Bryant. I didn't even make the connection that I like basketball, you like basketball. So this was an obvious one to
Yep.
talk about.
Right.
But the question associated with this one is how do I get to the rim? And that has a very specific sports context. If you don't play basketball, then maybe the value of that specific question gets lost a little bit. But there's lots of other questions that go along with this inside the profile that help you kind of comprehend this. So, for example, the big thing from this profile is the thing about Kobe's Mamba mentality, which is a constant quest to be better today than you were yesterday. So, there's lots of questions that can go along with that, like what is your motivator? What does my self talk sound like? Who do I need to study? How can I outwork myself in terms of becoming the best that you can be? And so my action item from this specific one is to make a list of people who inspire me and start asking questions about why they inspire me. And I feel like I've kind of done this. We're talking about internet heroes before. Like I've always kind of known these are the people that I look up to, but I've never been specific about what can I learn from them. And what I like about this profile is that it doesn't require you to engage in dialogue with them. You can study somebody's life without having a personal relationship with them. And I think that's pretty cool. And I think that by being intentional about that, you can probably grow quite a bit from people who are doing something that you want to do or doing something that you currently do, but do it better than you. Uh, I want to always be trying to get better. I want to get better as a husband. I want to get better as a father. I want to get better as a creator. I want to get better as a podcaster. I don't want to be complacent and be like, well, that's good enough. And just I show up and do my thing. I want to always be looking for those things that I can do better, which is why like I always listen back to every episode that I've ever published. And I hate hearing my own voice, but and I don't want to say I enjoy, but I get value out of recognizing the mistakes that I've made. It helps me not make them again. One of the big things for me with podcasting, Toastmasters kind of reinforced this, was the use of filler words. As soon as I started listening back to all the ums and the likes, it pretty much disappeared. And
Yeah.
that sounds ridiculous, but it really did. Like overnight, I stopped the majority of I still do it every once in a while, but it's 1/100th of what it was that first podcast episode that I recorded. Then I had to go back and edit it back afterwards. I'm like, man, This has
Yep.
got to get better because this
Yep.
is brutal.
Please help. Yes, that's the thing about podcasting. This is actually something I wrote down as an action item that I want to do is start listening back to Bookworm because I don't right now, and Mike knows this because it's frustrating. I'm sure for you, Mike, but I I don't do that. But at the same time, I'm aware that that can be extremely helpful. Like if you come back to Kobe Bryant in 2008, the Lakers made it to the championship and lost. And Kobe then went through a whole process after that. Like, where did we go wrong? Why did we lose? How am I going to lead this team differently? Like, he started asking himself these questions. And then they won the championship the next 2 years in a row. So he totally changed things around. But one of the ways that he did this was studying Michael Jordan and just paying attention to the fundamentals, like what is his footwork like? How does he handle the ball? What is it that he does different that makes him so exceptional? But one thing that they don't point out here that Mark didn't mention in this, because I've had my obsession with Kobe before, and I know that he used to watch his own tape back, and he would critique every little move that he made wrong by watching himself in that process. So he not only studied the people who he considered mentors, even though they wouldn't actually mentor him since, competitors. So like stuff like that wouldn't happen, but he would study himself as well to compare himself to the ideal that he has in his mind that he's working towards. And I think that's something that like I know I need to do. So I need to be, if I'm going to, continue this thing called podcasting, it's something I should, work on, because I know that I do some of the filler words occasionally. I have my phrases. I do try to watch and make sure I'm not repeating the same type of word many times. Like I always try to make sure I use synonyms instead of repeating it and making it easier to understand that way or more interesting. So like those are the things I know I do, but there are a lot of things I know I do that I should not do. So thus paying attention to that would be helpful.
Don't worry, Toby makes you sound good.
Thanks, Toby. You're the best.
Me too. And that's something that is when you first start paying attention to this stuff, there's a bunch of low hanging fruit. But my takeaway from this is I don't ever want to lose that. I want to constantly ask that question. Because if you're Kobe Bryant, you make it to the NBA finals, it's easy to just dismiss it as like, well, it didn't work out for us this time. But no, he's so obsessed. He wants to figure out how can I get even better? And that's the approach that I want to take to the stuff that I do. Next one that I wanted to talk about, I mean, there's a bunch of them we could talk about in this section. James Clear is in this section. Ryan Holiday is in this section. But
and we're skipping them both.
We are, yep. To talk about Florence Nightingale.
Yep, go Florence.
Yeah, so Florence Nightingale was, if I remember right, the person who kind of started the Red Cross, correct?
Ooh, I don't know that I could confirm that. That sounds correct,
basically,
but I can't place it.
She was in the 1800s, I believe, pressured to get married and have children, and she didn't want to do that, and she wanted to help people. And I remember reading her story recently in a different book. I forget which book it was, and basically volunteering in one of the wars to assist injured soldiers because they were just laying there dying. And so nobody stopped her. And then from there, she just continued to raise the bar. Like all these people were dying, and it was because of unsanitary conditions. And she was the one saying, basically, this isn't good enough. And she's got her own story that Mark kind of talks about in this book here. But the question with Florence is, how can I raise the standard? And because she was a woman living in the time and the society that she was in, she was basically encountering roadblocks to whatever she really wanted to do at every single turn. And so the big takeaway from this for me is kind of a combination of what I had understood of Florence Nightingale prior to reading this, and then applying these questions on top of that of how can I raise the standard, what makes me unique, and how do I navigate the roadblocks that are in my way. I feel like there are a lot of people, and myself included in the past, who encounter some resistance, and it's easy to be like, oh, well, Ryan Holiday says the obstacle is the way. So just figure it out, right? But it's very discouraging when you run into that stuff. And there's a temptation to think that, well, this isn't the right path. And yeah, I think it was courage is calling. Uh, Thanks, Blake, in the chat for pointing that out. So I want to spend some time thinking through these things. And I feel like I've kind of already sort of done this. I've got the whole concept of a life theme that I talk about in my faith-based productivity course. But this is a little bit different way of applying that same concept. And I feel like the questions that come out of this, coupled with her story, it gives people hope to think that, like, well, this is the thing that I really am passionate about, that I'm really excited about, the thing that gives me life. So what are the ways that I can raise the standard in this particular area? And then if you continue to raise the standard and you continue to get more excellent, that's when the attention comes. And like we are talking about the beginning with the podcast, like I was talking to somebody this morning, and I said, because they were interested in starting a podcast. And I said, if you're going to start a podcast, make sure it's something that you're really excited about and you're going to talk about anyways. You might do 100 episodes and you might not get very many downloads. And if you're doing it for numbers or you want to make some money or whatever, it's not going to happen. You have to have a motivation that goes beyond that, and you just have to continue to try to be more excellent with it. If you do that long enough, then people will start to take notice. And at that point, you can have like the wide influence. But until that point, just use whatever audience you have, whatever platform you have, and go deep. So the people who have, millions of people who follow them, they can throw out a tweet and it can reach a whole bunch of people, but it's not going to have like a profound impact. And you can have, it's kind of a unique opportunity where, as long as you have a smaller audience, you can go deeper and you can have a greater impact in somebody's life, and you don't really know who you're impacting. Just that one person, that they have the potential to reach a whole bunch of other people, to reach a whole bunch of other people. And I guess it kind of comes back to being present and making the greatest impact that you can. I mean, that's kind of my takeaway from this Florence Nightingale story, is like, I don't think she did it because she had this big dream that she was going to completely revolutionize healthcare. She just saw, like, these people are dying. They need some help. And this person in front of me who is getting these infections, like, this isn't right. We should do something to change this. And as long as you have that mindset, you can do a lot of good.
So Florence Nightingale did not start the Red Cross, but it was founded by Henry Dunant, I think is the way you say it. And he was greatly inspired by her work. So he credits her for the development of it, of the International Red Cross Society. And according to this article that I'm looking at, until 1934, they celebrated World Cross Day on her birthday. That's the connection.
There you go.
So there you go.
Thank you.
Coming back to the question here, how can I raise the standard? You're talking about a whole bunch of stuff I feel like I could jump off of, Mike. But this is one of those questions that, I was talking earlier about some of these have different intervals that you could ask these. This is one that you could ask at least weekly, if not daily. Like, how do I raise the standard? For myself, specifically, you can be looking at that from a different level, like as far as organizations that you're a part of, climate change, like so many things you can think about and endeavor to tackle. But if you apply it personally, like, it's something you can ask very regularly. And there's a lot here that you can jump into, like you're saying with the podcasting piece. Like, if you're going to do something, make sure it's something that you love to do. But then how do you raise the standard with that? Whenever you're starting out with something brand new, it's usually a bit haphazard. It's not super clean. Like, if you think of podcasting, like, it's easy for the first ones that we record to be terrible. We don't like them. I hate listening to myself back at episode 1 of Bookworm, but whenever you start, you're always going to have it like that. But that just
Mhm.
gives you a platform to start building on, and you can always start to get a little bit better. But at the same time, when you first start, you can be extremely niche in a very small sector, like what you're talking about. You don't really branch out and go wide until after you've got that initial build. And I would say, like in the case of Bookworm, I feel like we've never really started branching beyond our initial stance. But I also feel like it's only in recent months that we would even get to the point where we could even consider that. So anyway, that's a side point. All this to say, like, how can you raise the standard? Like, that's a question that can seem easy on the surface. Again, and you could easily answer this very quickly, like up my audio value or audio production ability, like get a better microphone. Like, sure, you can raise the standard in that way, but it's more of an impactful question if you ask it from the stance of like, okay, well, how do I become a better speaker? And how do I ask better questions? How do I have more insight in less time? Like, those are all questions that you can ask about podcasting in particular. But that's a whole different realm than just buy stuff, because buy stuff is easy. Be better is not.
Yeah, and even I think for me, raising the standard doesn't mean becoming more excellent necessarily in my craft or what I do, but in terms of the impact that I have in the life of people around me. So, yeah, if you're gonna want to, the context with the conversation that I was having this morning was I want to get this message out there. Okay, well, that's fine, but you're not going to get it out to a gazillion people at the beginning. What you got to do is you got to just really own this message with whoever is currently in your sphere of influence and just help them as much as you possibly can. And if you do that to the best of your ability and you're constantly asking, how can I do that better? Then there will be opportunities for you to do that at a larger scale. But if you're looking at it in terms of the numbers of these are the number of people that I want to reach or impact, you're not going to get there.
Right, right. Numbers can get in the way of a lot of good things.
Yes, exactly. Next one is Chris Shembra. We can cover this one pretty quickly. I just like this one because it's kind of focused on gratitude. And the question associated with this one is, whom haven't I thanked lately? If you dig into this a little bit more, the underlying question is basically, what relationships do I value the most in my life? And there's a encouragement in this section to not forget the people who helped you to get the things that you have. And I don't want to say that I have neglected that, but it can slip my mind from time to time. I do have a gratitude practice as part of my journaling routine. My wife and I have a gratitude practice as part of our date night. I have incorporated this into like even though my work meetings and things. Like gratitude is important, and I recognize that. But I also think that I tend to be more what is it, recency bias. Uh, you can focus on what has happened lately instead of looking more long term. And this is where I was 5, 10, 20 years ago. And I can see how this thing led to that thing, led to that thing. But that thing way back there, that was really the start of this. So I don't want to go back and send text messages to people that, influenced me 20 years ago. But my big action item from this section is just to notice those things more frequently. And the action item specifically is send encouraging text messages more often. I should probably make this a little bit more specific, but I'm not going to because I don't want to have a number associated with it. I feel
Ah,
like if
come
I
on.
did that, no, because I feel if I did that, then I would just grab something for the sake of grabbing something. So, kind of my approach to this is I want to zoom out a little bit more and recognize all of the things that have clicked into place and be thankful and express gratitude for those things more consistently but I feel like the actual application of this action item is most valuable when it is an organic response to that revelation. And if I try to put a number on it, I feel like I've confined it now to a task that needs to be done, and it loses some of the authenticity that goes along with it. Does that make sense?
I get what you're saying. I'm not sure it makes sense
Okay, that's fine.
because I think this is a. I think you can argue it both ways. So I don't think you're
Yep.
necessarily wrong. I think this is one of those cases where, because I'm a bit conflicted on what to do with this one from an action item. This is partly why I have an action item to go through this whole thing again. Because with this one, it's one where I can choose to be intentional with it and I can wait until that intention comes and then act on it, which I feel like is what you're saying you're planning to do. Or I can force myself to have the action and therefore drive the heart intention. You get what I'm saying?
Sure.
So it has to do with like the motivation before the action or the action that then encourages the motivation. Like that's kind of where I'm. This is why I say I don't think you're wrong. I just think that there's the possibility that sometimes for some people, because I feel like you're significantly better at gratitude than many people. I know you're way better at it than I am. And it's something that I would need to just say, I'm going to show gratitude to someone today. No idea who that is, but I am going to make it my task today to make sure that that happens. Like that's what I would have to do because I'm not good at it. I'm terrible at it, actually. So like that's where my heart would need to be. So again, I don't think you're necessarily wrong in your scenario, Mike, but I think in mine it would be completely different.
Sure. I can see that. I think it is a chicken and egg scenario. And I think
Yeah.
for me specifically, I don't want to focus on the task itself. I feel like the real value of this comes if it's rooted in inspiration from reflection, which is the big thing for me.
Yeah.
All right. Part 3 is expand possibility. And actually, the first profile here, Maya Angelou, this complements that whole idea we were just talking about well for me with the action item. Now, I knew who this was, but I didn't really know the story. And I should say the question in this section is how do I rise up? Now, the story here, and I'm sharing this from the book. I'm not really paraphrasing this. So she was raped when she was 8 years old. She told her family about it, and then the day the man was released from prison, they found him killed. And she thought that her words confessing that to her family are what actually killed that man. So felt very um she felt guilty about that. And she stopped speaking altogether for 5 years, which is a pretty serious reaction to that. And you hear that story and you're a monster if it doesn't do something inside of you. Like, how do you not have empathy and feel bad for her in that
Right.
situation? So, um, obviously, though, she was able to work through that. And part of the thing she credits for that is reading a ton. So, one of my bullets is read nonstop. Uh, the action item associated with this, though, for me is to list the people in my life who have been kind or inspirational because her story is like she had somebody who forced her to take a step out there, and that was kind of the thing that helped heal her. And she shares that story, or Mark shares that story in this profile. So it's a good inspiration. It shows me that one person can really have a domino effect in terms of the impact because you don't know who you're influencing. Maybe it's the next Maya Angelou, or maybe it's the next Ryan Holiday, or the next James Clear, whatever. Like the person that you have the opportunity to encourage and help that person rise up, that is very exciting to me, the type of impact that you can have when you go beyond the individual that is standing in front of you. So I want to make a list of the people in my life who have been kind or inspirational to me. I've already been thinking about this, and I've got several people top of mind, but I want to make it formalized, and then I want to pay it forward. I want to consider other people and how I can help them rise up. Again, just recognizing that you can't take the person or the people in your life at face value. You don't understand the real potential that they have. And you got to assume that there's something bigger there to be unearthed. And when you combine it with like all the stuff that we've talked about, the curiosity and trying to figure out what's really there, I mean, it's kind of natural that you would be more self sacrificial, I guess is the best way to describe it. Like, my time is precious, sure. I time block my day because I want to make the best use of the time that I have, but people are the reason for productivity. And if you go into it like someone needs something from you and you go into it with a curious mindset and you're trying to be present, I feel like that's kind of a perfect conditions for some really cool stuff to happen. And I feel like I've kind of seen this happen recently for me, and I want to continue to go in this direction. But just constantly looking for those people who you can help pull up. I mean, I had a conversation with somebody this morning. I mentioned about the podcast stuff. Somebody that I went to high school with that I ran into randomly at a coffee shop the other day. And I was on my way out to a meeting and was like, hey, we should get together and catch up, you know? So we did that today and it was really, really cool. Did I have time to do it today? Probably not, but I did it anyway. And it was
Nice.
extremely life giving. And you know what? All the other work stuff, that's all going to work out. It's all going to be fine. And that one experience that I had today, like that brings motivation to everything else that I've got to do today. And that's the kind of thing I'm recognizing translates into action and energy even further down the road. It's not just for today. It's gonna I'm gonna feel the residue of that for several days. And so I'm kind of thinking to myself, how do I like consistently do this? And really, it's not a system. It's not task oriented. It's just being more aware and taking advantage of the opportunities that are already there for me.
Yeah, there's so the main question of this section, how do I rise up? I cannot help but hear the song Rise Up from Hamilton. Rise up. I can't help. It's just over and over in my head. Have you seen this, Hamilton? You
Yep.
I can't get it out of my head. So I see it every time. I don't think that's bad. This is one of those cases where sometimes when you have a connection outside of the book, it helps you it like reminds you of the book whenever you hear that song or something triggers that later, which is I think is really good because like in this case, there's a couple of like sub questions underneath of this that we've kind of talked about. Where do I find the courage to rise up? How do I help others rise up? And I think the latter of those two is where a lot of genuine growth can come from. Because if I'm focusing on helping other people achieve what they are after, it forces me to go towards what I'm after as well. So it's kind of a double-edged scenario. So I'm a fan. I mean, this is a good question to ask, and you can take it again. You can take it on a lot of different levels. How do I help people rise up from an activist stance? How do I help people get to the point where they know what it is they want to do day to day throughout their life? At least set a mission. You know, build a team out of their family. Like, there's so many different scenarios that you could take this. So it's a solid question. I'm a fan.
Yeah, and I'm recognizing looking at this outline now that this section in particular, the expand possibility, this is really abundance mindset driven. If you have a scarcity mindset, none of this stuff makes any sense.
No, not at all.
But when you recognize that there's no scarcity, and just because I happen to be successful doesn't mean you can't be successful. And let's just all be decent humans to each other. That's really the only way to do it.
Right. Right.
Next profile is Naveen Jain. And the question from this one is, what if it were possible? And I'm trying to condense this because we're running long. But I go through this profile and I am encouraged to think bigger. Society trains us to recognize limits, and this profile kind of is like, take the lid off. Imagine if there was no limits. What would you do if you were wildly successful? That's not the question that's being asked here, but that's kind of the direction. Really, the thing that's being asked in this profile is actually more practical. It's getting you to take the first step in that direction without feeling like this is absolutely ridiculous and there's no way I'll ever achieve this, so why am I even doing this? But recognizing that every problem is solvable, recognizing that you're creating a lot of your own limits. And so those limits will hold you back from making that decision to take action. So let's imagine for a moment that you've gone through and you've made this decision. You've taken that action. How do you feel after this decision has been made? And recognizing that our own imagination and our own definition of what's possible and what isn't is what drives us. It encourages me to think bigger. You know, what would it look like if everything that I did, I had, you know, the golden touch, and everything that I did was going to succeed? Where would I take action that I am not currently, just because I feel like, well, I can't do that super well, so I'm just not even going to try? The big takeaway from me for this whole section is just try it anyways. The result almost doesn't matter. The belief in yourself is the thing that does. And just throw it out there and don't judge it by the result, but give yourself the affirmation that you're the type of person who just takes action on these things. And I feel like if you do that consistently, you'll surprise yourself. I'm kind of learning that myself. Like, there's some things that I'm doing currently that I didn't think I could do, but I'm learning that I can because I put myself in the position to try. And I had to overcome some limiting beliefs just to put myself out there. It took somebody close to me saying, you got to quit talking the way that you're talking because you can do this. That was like the first time I believed in myself enough to actually put myself out there and try it.
Yeah.
And I'm learning that, yeah, I have the ability to do it. I just never even saw it before.
Right. This one, I feel like this particular chapter is one that probably has impacted me the most out of all of them, which is saying something. Because what if it were possible? And my brain jumps to a whole bunch of different places, and some of these what if it were possible, like, it doesn't have to be, I don't think, based on current, you know, cultural, scientific, societal standards, it doesn't have to fit within those, and it doesn't have to make logical sense what you're asking, because that's the point. So some of what I when this happened, one of when I read this chapter, one of the things that jumped in my mind was, what if it were possible to cure ADHD? Like, I don't know that that's actually scientifically feasible, because I don't know enough about it to be able to say yay or nay on that. But the question there is, well, okay, well, what if it was? Or even if you're not curing it, what if there was a way to solve your specific symptoms with something? I don't even know what that is. Like, what would it be? Like, or if you had it under control, how would you act? Like, and then you get what I'm getting at here. Like, if you start to ask those questions, and even though you don't really think it might actually be possible, what if it was? And then what actions would you take if it was? That can change a lot of things very quickly And it can get you to really process some of these other components here, like the other two questions that are in this chapter. What limits am I setting? Okay, for those of you who are in the ADD world, I find I set a lot of limits on myself unknowingly. But the question is, what are those? And how do I turn those loose? Like, how do I break those chains? What do you do with that? What if these limits could be let go? And the other one here, how do I know if this is the right decision? Like, that's another great question. So, if you get what I'm saying, like if you start trying to bump
Yep.
up against all these things, like you can have a lot of good things come from them, because I feel like a lot of us tend to put these glass ceilings on ourselves and we lower them, and then we want to know why we can't achieve what we want to achieve. So I really, 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 really like this one.
Yeah. There's so many other ones that I want to talk about, but for the sake of time, we'll pick one more. Uh, and that is Steve Jobs. And I almost said we should not talk about this one because we've talked about Steve Jobs a lot. But the thing I want to talk about from this is very different than what I thought it was going to be when I went into this profile. So, the question that goes along with this one is, how can I think different? And in 1997, there was that ad, which here's to the crazy ones. I actually have that framed. I really like that poem. But the thing that stands out to me from this is what Mark calls the pause. I don't know if he stole this from somebody else or not, but this was the thing when Steve was driving people crazy with his perfectionism. This is the thing that would cause him and his teams to go back to the drawing board because something wasn't good enough. And there's a question in here that he, I guess, asked: if it could save someone's life, could you find a way to shave 10 seconds off the boot time? That sounds a little extreme, but you can see how he kind of drove that idea forward. But that premise of the pause, this is something that doesn't just apply to product development. This is something that I feel can be value in anybody's day to day. Where in your life could you slow down to think? Right. So maybe you know where this is going now. Also in this chapter or profile, Mark talks about the whole idea of mindfulness meditation and the value of that. Mentions all the usual suspects, calm, headspace, all that kind of stuff. But the way that it's framed here with the pause and not being guided, this is very much in line with something that David Sparks and some other people have been talking to me about in terms of mindfulness meditation. Is like the real pro move with this is not having an app that you follow, but just thinking and just focusing on the breath, just slowing down. So the action item here is to find a meditation routine that actually works for me. And I've been doing this a little bit actually already, but not having to have a process that I follow and just slowing down for a couple of minutes and focusing on the breath. This, for whatever reason, feels a lot more approachable to me than the whole idea of mindfulness meditation, because I've tried all those apps, the 10% happier, stuff like that. We've talked about this over and over and over again on this podcast. Do you still stick with a mindfulness meditation routine?
I do, but in a weird sort of way. So I don't use any apps for it, but I've started incorporating that into like my morning and evening walks outside. So I do kind of like a
Okay.
walking meditation of sorts. So that's what I've morphed into.
Okay. Yeah. And that's kind of the thing. As I'm thinking about this, is like, I just got to find my own version of this. I got to not feel bad that somebody else's meditation practice hasn't clicked for me.
Yeah.
And I want to get a little bit more definition of what that looks like. I feel like I'm 80% of the way there, because I think part of this is my daily prayer routine, which for whatever reason, I've hesitated to like lump that in with the term meditation, but it kind of is. And then combining that with moments in my day-to-day routine where, you know what, things are moving a little too quick right now. I just need to hit pause and I need to take a step back and just a minute or two, quick recenter, get some space, and then I'll re-engage.
Yep.
Because I feel like I've got opportunities to do that, and that would provide a lot of benefit. But I kind of just get caught up in the flow and the momentum and don't take advantage of those.
Yeah, I think having that space between things when it does get crazy is super helpful. But I think being willing to rebrand certain activities as meditation is perfectly fine. Like a prayer practice absolutely is that. Think about what meditation is, sitting and focusing on the thing in front of you. Well, during a prayer practice, that's exactly what you're doing. Or, Bible study, if you want to go that route too, like that can be the exact same thing. So
Exactly. Yeah.
it's okay to do this is partly why I've done the whole walking thing, because I realized that I was doing my best on those walks to pay attention to my surroundings and trying not to let my mental, race car take off and keep me focused on other things. But I want to focus on the nature that I'm in right now. So I'm doing that same thing. It's just in a different form. But because of all the mainstream pieces, and even what they explain here with Steve Jobs, his practice was more of the sit and meditate, like some of the cliche views of that. But that's one small piece and one small form of that. So kudos to you. You can find a different way to do this. You don't have to use Headspace. It's okay.
Yep. All right. The book ends with a profile on Marc himself. And this is just sharing kind of his journey. There's some specifics here about like a theme for the year and kind of how he arrived at the place where he wrote this book, because his word for the year was thriving. He talks about scans and prompts and things like that, which I don't know. I feel like this is a cool way to end it. And I feel like there's some really cool stuff in here, but I also think that it's a lot of stuff that we've kind of covered before. And so since we're long on time, we can probably skip this one.
Yep. Basically, it's a summarization of here's what I've learned from all this stuff.
Yep. Yep. He does give some practical tips on how to apply this yourself. Some structure there, but I think it's something that you kind of have to discover for yourself. And it's a mashup of a lot of the types of books that Bookworm listeners have already read.
Yep.
So I guess that takes us to action items. And I've got a bunch.
I was going to say, which of the 40 do you want to talk about?
So I have jotted down 5 of them from our discussion here. This is not everything from my outline, but I think this is what I am going to land on here for formal action items. I want to list out what I fear in a single sentence. And this is not so I can continue to allow this to hold me back, but just naming it and the attempts of overcoming it. And I know it's easy to be like, well, I don't have any fear, or I think if you dig deep enough, you'll find something. So that's what I'm going to do, is dig deep enough and see if I can find something. Add the how was I curious today to my journaling template. And like my other journaling template sections, I don't intend to force myself to answer this every day, but I'm going to create the opportunity in the prompt. So I have an opportunity to put something there if something stands out to me. And then as part of my personal retreat process, I review all those journal entries. So I feel like a couple months from now, when I do my next personal retreat, that's going to provide value for me. I'm going to make a list of people who inspire me and start asking questions about why. I'm going to share encouraging text messages more frequently, and I'm going to find a meditation practice that works for me. Now, you've mentioned a couple of them, but the one that you keep coming back to, so the only one that I have written down at the moment is to go through this all again.
Yes. Yeah, I have three. So
Okay.
I have two of these are well, one of them is kind of a summarization. The other one is derived from a chapter we didn't cover. But one of these is to visualize my day ahead of time. As someone who can easily get distracted, I feel like it's extremely helpful for me, and I've done this in the past, so I know it works. But it's super helpful for me to take 5 minutes, and I actually have to set a timer for this because I'll shortcut it. 5 minute timer in the morning, and then walk the entire day mentally. Like, what is it that I go? Where is it that I go sit and do X, and then I move to go where to do Y? Like, I have to walk through that visually in my brain, and then I'm much more likely to follow through on it. Otherwise, I'll get distracted and not do the things that I actually intended to do. So it's kind of a different form of time blocking, but it's all mental. So that works well for me. I need to do that. So that's one. Two, again, this is kind of a summarization of a bunch of these, but journaling morning and night, because again, I don't have this practice of asking questions at all right now. So I'm going to start with this real quick morning and evening thing. It doesn't have to be anything big and elaborate. I'm just trying to make it a habit of basically a morning and evening check-in. I don't know what those questions are yet, because task number 3 is to, I'm not going to reread the book, but basically skim my way through it. Having been through it and I know all of the stories and such at this point, and we've talked about it and I've processed it to some degree, I want to kind of skim my way back through it and collect these questions and figure out what those intervals are going to be. Now, some of that's going to be in those journaling prompts, but I don't know that for certain as far as like which ones are daily and which ones aren't. I don't know the answer to that, but that's, I feel like, a good starting point for it at this juncture in the road. So that's where I'm going to jump off on this journey.
All right. Style and rating, my book. So I go first. This should be no surprise that I absolutely love this book.
Yep.
I do agree that the majority of the value to be had from this is not in a single crank through this reading. I feel like the questions that are presented here have phenomenal value, and I get the approach that's taken in terms of writing it. It's almost kind of a shame that it has to be packaged this way. Like, people probably wouldn't pay $24 for a list of questions,
Yeah.
but that's really the valuable thing that you're getting out of this.
Right.
It is really well done. I feel like the book itself is high quality. I really like the book. It feels different than most other books that you would get off of Amazon. The corners are rounded. It's really, really nice. Standard Baron Fig stuff. I think Marc did a great job with the profiles. I kind of talked a little bit about it at the beginning. The bullet list of the bio gives enough context without having to waste words in telling more stories to get people familiar with the person that he's talking about. And what that does is it makes it very condensed. I know you mentioned it's 240 pages, but it's actually probably not long. It's probably not long in terms of the number of words, because remember, each one of these chapters is a couple pages long, and then it'll end like at the top of the page, and the rest of the page will be blank, and then sometimes there's even another blank page after that, so that it can start on the left-hand page in the next profile. So I don't know. It's an easy read. It's easy to just crank through this. If you're looking to extract maximum value from this, probably don't do that. Probably take your time and really think about some of these questions that are being asked there. But I also think, having gone through this, that I've collected a bunch of these questions, and these are going to go in a bank for me somewhere, and I'm going to go back to the well at different points in my life, and this is going to continue to give me value. It's not just this group of questions at this point in my life. The question itself, it could be great, but it maybe doesn't land for you in a specific context, a specific season, but later on it could be the exact right thing for you. So what Mark has done is he's given you a whole bunch of questions, which they're not all going to be awesome home run. This question right now changed my life. Some of them will change your life further down if you go back and you revisit them. But the value of what you get, if as long as you recognize the value of the questions here, is absolutely phenomenal in my opinion. I feel like everybody should read this. In fact, I've gifted like 12 copies of this, I think, since I originally got this one. And almost everybody that I have given it to is like, man, that book is so good. Thanks for giving that to me. So I wholeheartedly would recommend this to the Bookworm audience. This is one that should be in your library. And I'm going to give this 5 stars. I don't know how you could rate it less than that, other than if you wanted something that you didn't really have to think about. If you didn't want to have to engage with and ask the tough questions, if that makes you uncomfortable, then yeah, you're not going to like this one. But if you're curious at all and you don't mind looking at things and maybe dealing with some uncomfortable things with the intention of becoming better and growing yourself as a person, then there is so much gold to be mined here. And it's not in the information that's provided, it's not in the system that's being sold to you. It's simply in the questions and the prompts and letting your brain unravel this stuff for itself.
If you have a fixed mindset and you have a victim mindset and you don't want to let either one of those go, don't read this book. Everybody else, you should read this.
Yep.
That's pretty much what you need to know, because this is going to force you to grow. I don't think it's going to be possible to ask these questions, or even like, you don't even have to ask the questions of yourself. I'll even go that far. Having read this, there's a lot of this and the stories and the questions that are being asked that I didn't actually formally ask myself that question, and yet I'm processing the potential answers for it and realizing I've got a lot of work to do. And thankfully, I have a date with my wife tonight, so there's a lot of questions that I want to ask her, and hopefully she can answer. She's probably not going to appreciate me springing these on her, but she'll be okay. And yet, as I went through this, there's a lot of points at which I was getting a little emotional with it. Again, like, I don't know what this, you and these books, you've done that to me lately. So it's something you should read. I absolutely wholeheartedly think everybody should read this. It's an easy 5.0. I don't know how else to rate it than that, because it just has a huge impact. And I think that some of the value of it is being willing to set up some process or system at which point you're able to ask these questions regularly at some point, and not just read them once, answer them once, and be done. I think being willing to tackle these more than once as seasons change, as life events happen, I think that's where the value can truly come from this long term. So please pick this up and read it if you haven't already.
All right. So let's put Personal Socrates on the shelf.
Yep.
What's next, Joe?
The next one up is Unwinding Anxiety by Judson Brewer, which I'm a little hesitant about at this point. When I first picked it, I was like, okay, this would be really good. I deal with a decent amount of anxiety. And now that I've gone through Personal Socrates and asked all these questions, I'm like, maybe I do have the answers to that right now. But reading a book on it probably wouldn't hurt yet at this point. So we'll cover that one next time. And then, what are you picking? What's after that? Please don't tell me it's this Gap book that you've got up here.
No, it's not. So one of the profiles, which we didn't even talk about, was Chase Jarvis, who is the CEO of Creative Live. He has a book called Creative Calling, which looks amazing. So we're going to do that one.
Nice. I was on the edge of choosing to order that one just for my own sake. So that makes it even easier.
One of the video reviews for the book on Amazon says, only read if you want life to become more interesting.
Okay, that's fair enough. Sounds good. Any Gap books, Mike? I know you've got one, and I'm not reading this one with you.
That's okay. So mindfulness meditation, yada, yada, yada. There is a book I don't remember if it was mentioned in this one or not, but Dan Harris, the 10% Happier guy, also wrote another book called Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics. And I believe that is the one that's more the approach to mindfulness meditation as opposed to his own personal story. I picked this one up at Half Price Books the other day. So I am going to start this one actually today. I've got my other Gap book that I am finishing, and then I'm going to read this one because it's pretty short before jumping into Unwinding Anxiety.
Sure. Well, if I have a Gap book this time, I might actually I'm going to be going through this one again, Personal Socrates, somewhat. But I also did just reread Take Back Your Family with my wife. I feel like that one, Mike, you should pick up and go through for the podcast you do with Rachel. I feel like that would be a solid, because it's all about building a team with your family and being on a mission together collectively. Like, that is the core of that book. I feel like it would fit you pretty well.
All right. Well, we actually have that one.
Oh, there you go.
Haven't read it yet, but
you please do.
We'll take a look.
It's a solid. That it is.
All right. So thank you to everybody for listening. Thank you specifically to the Bookworm Club premium members who value the podcast enough to support it financially. We really appreciate you backing up your support of the show with some money that helps us keep the lights on. We don't have ads. We don't really make a whole lot from this. If you want to support the show, you can either use the links that are in the show notes for the books that we mentioned. Those are all affiliate links. Or you can support it directly by going to bookworm.fm/membership. And if you decide to pitch in, it's $5 a month. You get a couple of perks. You get all the MindNote files from the books that we read. That's how I take my book notes. So I upload those as PDFs and as MindNote files into the club. There's a Bookworm wallpaper that I created. There's some Gap book episodes that Joe recorded. But really, it's just it's a way for you to support our work. And we really appreciate people being willing to do that. It helps keep this thing going. So thank you to everyone who has chosen to do that. If you want to become a member, again, bookworm.fm/membership.
And if you're a loyal member of Bookworm, you know how this goes. You need to pick up the book Unwinding Anxiety by Judson Brewer, and we'll cover it together in a couple of weeks. Well done, sir.
All right, you too.
Command S. I got it wrong. Carol was the one that did the 4,000 weeks that's currently reading it.
Gotcha.
Did I catch that right, Carol? If you're still around. But yes.
Man, I feel emotionally exhausted after that one.
Yes. Which I kind of knew was coming. I didn't sleep well last night. And so I knew I was going to be tired, and I tend to be a little more emotional when I'm tired. So I knew that was coming because this book is an emotional book. And now I'm processing the fact that I have a date with my wife tonight where we're planning to talk about difficult things already. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to sleep well tonight. It's good. It's good, though. It's how you grow, right? That's the answer.
Yep.
All right. Good to know I got it right, Carol. Cool. All right.
Anything else?
We're both tired.
Just
I can
tired.
tell. No, I think that's good. Yeah. I'm excited to see how this one turns out, but I'm also curious to see what people think about it. Always fun to see the feedback on an episode.
Yeah. This is a really, really good book. At some point in the near future, we're going to have to redo our top books of all time.
Mm-hmm.
maybe 150. I don't know. But yeah, I feel like we've really had a string lately of, what does Joshua call them? Golden, or Toby, golden episodes. Like we both rate them 5.0.
Yep.
See, we did Personal Socrates. Atlas of the Heart, I think, was a double 5.0. Was 4,000 Weeks? Yep, that one was.
Clicky,
Good books
clicky.
lately.
Da, 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 da.
Courage is Calling. That was 130. The Extended Mind, 129. That was double 5.
It's a lot of them.
Yeah.
That's cool though.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else you want to tell people before we go?
Nah, thanks everybody for being on. It's always more fun when there's a lively discussion.
Even if you're talking about things we can't talk about at the time, it's still fun to.
Yeah.
Yes.
True.
Try to keep up with 2 conversations at one time. I can do that. I don't know how you do with it, Mike.
And still be present.
Yes. Yes. With both.
It's hard. It's hard.
Too good. Too good. All right. We're going to head out. See you guys in a couple weeks and read a book between here and there.
Will do.
Bye, all.